Alright, everybody. Happy Mother's Day and welcome to another episode of the Safely Stream podcast here on Game Wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. It is for the week of May 9th, 2021. As always, my co-host from Nexus Games, Sharky. How are you doing?
I am breathing. How about you?
Barely.
Yeah, same here.
So, for this week, we have a very, non-Mother's Day related topic. Although, I guess Get Good Mother's Day could maybe fit here, right?
Yeah, get good at Mother's Day. This is for everybody who did not buy their mother a Mother's Day present, I guess.
This is a gift, send it to your mother and have her like and subscribe and all that.
Yeah. And tell her to lick the smash button.
She'll know what that means.
Exactly.
But while I'm sure plenty of people are out celebrating, hanging out with their family, we have a very challenging and hardcore topic for this week.
It's very fitting.
As we're going to be discussing the trap that developers fall into when it comes to chasing and appealing to a hardcore fan base. And
did we pick this topic today because we knew that there'd be backlash if we did it on any other day?
Maybe. Let's go with that plan. Let's put that into the lore. But
the game wisdom / Nexus Games lore.
Sure. But for our topic, the reason why I decided to bring this up, it basically came with both the combination of me having my chat with Steven from Able Gamers and looking at the reviews and impressions from R-Type Final 2. And R-Type Final 2 was released this past week as yet another love letter to the classic franchise. I'm going to have my review of it up tomorrow, and I am not so pleased with it. And if you look on the forums, there are plenty of arguments over the price, design, and quality of the game when it comes to the different degrees of fandom for R-Type. And there are a lot of people who aren't liking the game despite being shmup fans and even fans of the previous games. While the people who are decrying it are the hardcore, the people who 1cc the game, who are more than happy to play every level over again and again and again, and it's a topic that we see play out among pretty much any franchise has built up a very vocal and very noticeable hardcore fan base.
I got a question for you. Are most hardcore players, fan bases, are they masochists?
Probably not. Unless they're masochistic for their specific fandom.
They might be.
And as we've said before, we've discussed this topic about the double-edged sword of fandom many times here on the cast, as well as with videos on Game Wisdom. And fandom is a very important part about game development, because most of your fans are going to be essentially free marketing and hype for your game. You need people to care about your game if you want your game to stay in business. But what happens when the loudest and most smallest portion of your fan base begin to dictate and kind of override all talk about your game, that tends to become a problem.
And it's not just in games. That applies to a lot of things.
Ooh, yes.
Including anime.
No, anime and cartoon fans, they're nice, right?
Most of them are.
We could say something like Avatar: The Last Airbender sucks, so I'm sure that won't cause any trouble.
It's time to cancel Josh.
Oh, yes. And the issue when it comes with fandom for a lot, we'll focus on video games. I think that's where our wheelhouse is, right?
Yeah. Although that might be copyrighted or trademarked.
But video game fandom has certainly grown and exploded. And something that I talked with Steven about is that a lot of people equate their self-worth and their value to the games that they are fans for. And that often, or most lately, leads to a lot of the problems that we talk about.
Mm-hmm. They also refer to that as being a fanboy / fangirl.
Mm-hmm.
And when the fanboy / fangirls becomes the only person that the developers listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a red flag. That's a very, very red flag.
Yeah.
Both the fanboys and fangirls are red flags, as well as developers are red flag for listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because a proper developer, is supposed to listen to everybody, and then figure out what is the best course of action based off of what he's heard, kind of thing, from everybody.
Yep, and that is again where the first part of this trap comes in. That if you only listen to the vocal minority of your game,
or just the majority of what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because the majority of what you hear is likely to be the vocal minority because they're very vocal.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good question from random internet user. When is someone considered a fanboy rather than just a casual user fan?
And when they say that everything about your game is perfect the way it is, it's the best game in the world, don't change it at all. Because no game is ever perfect. You should always change it for the better and improve your game. And no game is ever perfect.
And if anyone says anything bad about the game, then surely it's that person's fault and they're being evil and we should yell at them and insult them.
Yeah, and if anybody says anything bad about the game, I'm personally hurt, over it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yes,
I mean, as a developer, you have to avoid that, because if you can't avoid that as a developer, you're not cut out to be a developer.
Yep. And I spoke with Steve about this, that, there are people, when I say there's a problem with the game, they go, oh my god, how dare you? Or, you're just attacking this game because, you're bad at it. A video game can't be attacked. It's not a person. It's a product. Oh, yes, Chris. I live in New Jersey. I am a stone's throw away from Philly. I know about Eagles fans, for the East Coasters who are watching this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you could insert any major football team into that, and I think it would apply. Or hockey. Flyers fans as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's, as the designer, you have to admit, it's your call to what changes to make. But there's not a limit to feedback. Mm-hmm. You want to take all the feedback, but you only make the changes that you think are beneficial to the games as a whole. And you think it would be a good direction. So you take all the feedback, you calculate that all up in your head, you figure out what feedback to throw away, what feedback that you would want to put in but is way too much work, and you put that in a deep, deep treasure chest that maybe one day you might be able to open. Mm-hmm. And you take the feedback that is feasible to put in there, makes sense to put in there, and you put it in there.
And like Shark said, there's a big difference between saying, okay, this feedback is okay, we can't do it now, versus saying, all negative feedback is not allowed and I will ban anyone from saying it.
Yeah, too many red flag developers have said that, and their game has suffered for it.
Yeah. And the reason why they suffer is that when you appeal to the hardcore minority, that's a minority. That is a very small group of people who are playing your game. And we see this among pretty much any game that is, described as being, for the hardcore, or it's the get good crowd, or anything along those lines. That they'll have a lot of people saying, don't make any changes, it's the game is perfect, it's the consumer's fault why they're not enjoying this game. And then when you look on their store page, they probably have less than 1,000 reviews. Some cases may have less than 500 reviews.
Yep.
And
a lot of the reviews they have are negative.
Or it's all positive, but it's absolutely useless. This is the best game ever, 10 out of 10. I can't, I struggle with this game every day, but I love it, 10 out of 10.
Or this is the most addicting game ever, 10 out of 10. Never seen that on Raid Shadow Legends.
Mm-hmm.
In their advertising.
Yeah.
Although I haven't seen any of those 10 out of 10s. I've only seen 3 out of 5s.
Well, some needs to get good at bribing then.
Yeah. Well, I think they did get good at bribing. They bribed Google pretty clearly because they have a 5 out of 5 stars on the thing, but you scroll down on those reviews and,
Well, they got good at the money side.
Scrolling, the biggest you've seen is 3 out of 5.
Yeah. And to Chris's point, constructive feedback is important, but as a developer, here's the dirty little secret. Most of the feedback you're going to get is not going to be constructive.
Yeah.
You'll get, again, like for myself as well, or like anyone who's asking for feedback, you're going to get 5 people who say, this is great, don't change a thing. You'll get another 5 people who say, this is horrible, you need to change it. For my book review right now, I looked it up. Right now I have 1 5-star review and 1 2-star review, and nobody's saying anything. So, how do you improve when either you are really loved or really hated, but nobody tells you anything else?
Yeah. And there's the thing about constructive and unconstructive is, any feedback except for just toxic feedback and praising feedback, except for the 2 most extremes, there is always something you can gain from it. If people are just saying this game is horrible or this game is great, there's nothing you can get from either one of those. That's the very much far of either one. But you just bring it in one touch, and there's constructive feedback. There's stuff. It's not constructive, but it's usable feedback.
Exactly.
You get down a notch, and this game is horrible. There is no volume slider. You're like, okay, there is no volume slider. Take the rest of it, throw it away, and put that they didn't like it. I didn't like it. It didn't have a volume slider, so implement a volume slider.
And
or I love it, but I wish it had X. So you might want to integrate X.
And another point, like to what Chris is saying, we've used that comparison before. I spoke with John Brieger about this. Like, you can take 3 kinds of feedback. This game is horrible, I keep dying. Developers are stupid, I can't get past level 3. What the hell is wrong with this game? Why aren't my attacks working? And those 3 sound like completely different issues, but they could all be the same thing regarding the combat of your game. And as a developer, if this would be, if those are reviews on your Steam page, you might want to go in or reply to them. Could you give us more details about, where your weapon's not working, what's happening, kind of thing? Or could you give us more details about why you can't get past level 3? What's your trouble? Could you give us, more information on X, kind of thing? And ask them, because they will most likely respond to you and tell you what the heck's going on, kind of thing. And it may all come back, and there's some kind of bug that makes your weapon not work. 70% of the time you hit the button, so this guy can't get past level 3 because of that. This guy is complaining about the weapons not working because it's happening all across the stage, but he gets through it, kind of thing, and beats the stage. And the other one, there's another issue, kind of thing, and it's all linked to the same thing. And it's a bug that only affects that one level, for example, and that's how you find the bug, Well, hopefully that's not how you find the bug, but if you're released with the bug, that's the way you will hopefully
you will hopefully take all that information and find it because of that. It may not be a bug. It may be an unintended feature. It may be any number of things. It may be because you balance things wrong. It may be any number of things, but you can start to figure it out by reading their feedback. Whether it's discarding the hate part of it and just keeping the nugget, kind of thing. The best way to think of it is like, you can have a pile of shit, but if you have a pile of shit that has one little shred of a gold nugget, you might want to dig into it, figure out what it is, get that piece of gold out.
And when you refuse to listen, this is what really cultivates that hardcore fandom. That if you don't put any changes in, if you're only trying to appeal to, again, that very small market, then you're not going to really be able to grow as a developer. And it's something that we see from a lot of smaller indies who, as we said before, who will just keep making the same game. It's the same kind of platformer. It's the same kind of RPG. Same kind of brutally difficult shmup. And I think this is one of those major points, I'll read a random's comment after this, that as a developer, you have to have a market for your game. Is it a shmup game? Is it a horror game? Is it an FPS, platformer, RPG, whatever? But while that creates the foundation for your title, there are always ways to make your game more approachable and more inviting for people who aren't, that 5% of the total fan base.
Mm-hmm. And a random internet user's question. So first off, you need to gather data. Number one, some people liked it, some people hated it. Well, first off, you need to figure out how many people liked it and how many people hated it. Next thing you need to do is ask the people that hated it why they hated it. Is it because it took too many button presses? Is it because it delayed the game? Is it because it broke the pacing? Is it because it was just not fun? Was it because whatever reason, kind of thing? And you investigate that kind of thing, and you take all that information. And then you evaluate it, and you then apply that to if you're going to change it or not. And depending on which, another aspect of it is how important is that mechanic to your core gameplay loop.
Exactly.
If it's very, very important, then you need to work on making it fun or
clearer.
Yeah.
Yep, and that takes me to a story when I spoke with the indie developer of, I forget the name of it. This was a space-like tactical strategy game. Concealed something? I forget the full name of it. But one of the big things about it, was this it? Here it is, Concealed Intent. And one of the major elements of this game was the use of kind of space sonar in order to pick up characters and figure out where they are in the kind of the open world. And there were people who didn't like that mechanic. They felt that, it didn't feel right or was cumbersome. And the developer kind of got, I think, halfway through it. He said that this was a core part of his game. And again, when you're building a game for a market, every game inherently is going to have some barriers. If you don't like jumping and you go buy a platformer and you complain about jumping, there's nothing really there for you as a developer to comment on. You can't really get much from that. Yeah. But if people are having issues with a mechanic or a system, you have to try and do everything you can to make it as the very best possible version you can make. With a platforming, for instance, there is a very wide line, I should know, of what is good and bad platforming design and good and bad UI design with that.
What about drop shadows underneath your characters in a 3D platform?
Yeah. or having your character kind of get motion or keep its momentum while it's jumping, which makes it hard to gauge jumps, or having a camera that properly shows things. So if something is integral to your game, as in your game is not going to be it without it, then you need to make that the very best version of it. If you are making a first-person shooter and your gunplay is horrible, the controls feel very clunky, then you really don't have a good first-person shooter. And we've said this before about the idea of janky games. That, yes, something can be integral to your experience, but that's not... Thank you, Chris. That is not an excuse to make it poor. And I think this is another interesting segue, but the idea of hardcore fandom surrounding polarized games. Like, we've seen stuff like with Cruelty Squad, and a lot of games that are, I don't want to say they're designed purposely to be bad, but they're designed to kind of evoke that low quality feel to them. And there are pros and cons to this approach. The pro is that you're making something that stands out and is unique, but in the same breath, if somebody can't experience your game because of sensitivity issues, or there's no control rebindings, or the game is just a pain to play, then yes, you are going to have a fan base to that, but you could have so much more if you made improvements to it.
Mm-hmm. You know, that just reminds me of the CD Projekt Red, Cyberpunk issues,
Mm-hmm.
How the game was extremely buggy and everything, and there was a hardcore fan base that's like, no, this is the best game ever.
Mm-hmm.
While pretty much everybody else is like, what in the hell is going on here? I want a refund.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is that issue when it comes to only catering to the minority of your fan base. That, yes, people can get around annoying issues. Your hardcore fans don't care that you don't have a sword feature in your UI, or that maybe it takes 4 additional clicks to issue a command to a character.
Yeah, none of your hardcore fans care about that. But anybody who's not a hardcore fan will absolutely care about that. If and I mean that goes into the design of my last game, Chromasia,
Mm-hmm.
to where when you look at traditional tactical RPGs, it was seen as overcomplicated and hard to play kind of thing. So it's like, how can we help address that kind of thing? So in like a Disgaea game, you have to move, then you have to select an attack, and if you're not lined up, you have to undo, and then you redo, and you do that 8-9 times until you're properly lined up, and then you figure out, I got properly lined up, but I can't. This attack won't work, so you have to undo again, and then go with a different plan, redo that like 12 times until you finally get it, kind of thing. And it's just a pain in the ass,
And every hardcore SRPG fan has internalized this by now.
Yeah, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But with my game, what I did was we integrated when you press the move button, or when you press the attack button, there is no move button. When you press the attack button, it activates the move, it activates the attack, and you pick which attack you want, kind of thing. And at which point you start moving your character out at the same time as your attack is moving out. You see your attack range move every time you move, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then it also integrated an automatic rotation system so that if it detects an enemy within the range of, if you were pointing that direction, kind of thing, then it will turn to point towards that, and it'll stay pointed towards that until you go to point towards something else. And we did the similar thing for defense, and just have it integrate movement and defense into the same thing. And we also integrated, attack and special / magic attack together into one UI. So there was 2 buttons. One had a sub menu versus 4 or 5 buttons with 2 sub-menus kind of thing.
And
Far less clicks.
And here's a pro game dev tip for everyone watching us live record right now. Do not listen to your hardcore fan base when it comes to making your UI UX better, or if they are complaining against those issues, I should say, because UI UX is never the place where there should be difficulty, complexity, confusion. And
You're actually playing a Dark Souls game.
I would argue no, not at this point.
That was a joke.
Okay. But
because they got to get good at UI.
Mm-hmm. And the point, and this is where this is another very big point about the hardcore fan trap. That, as I just said, fans internalize issues. It's no longer a problem for them. But when you playtest your game to new people, they are going to spot these things like, lighthouses in the dark. What was that?
Like glowing neons.
Yeah. And when that happens, I can predict almost 90% of the time, with XCOM luck, I guess, that the fan base will turn on those people. Oh, just do this, this, and this. Why are you complaining about this UI? Or, it's supposed to be hard to, select a gun. That's just part of the charm of this game. No. You do not want UI UX issues to define your game. Because this is another area where the hardcore fan base can hurt a title. That if they treat bad things in your game as good design, it is going to kill your game in the wider market.
Yeah. You definitely don't want a bad designed game. So don't listen to people. Well, I meant listen to them, but don't act on ignorant people telling you, yeah, that bad thing is good. It's like, yeah,
just put 40 key. You use every key on your keyboard. It will make the game more realistic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It will make the game more realistic because real life requires the entire keyboard.
That sounds like a motivational message right there. You could put that on. I know you could put on a Mother's Day card. My thoughts on community to play in a fully diegetic way. That's
well, the thing is you really got to be careful about diegetic UI. For most part, it's not possible.
Unless you really jump through hoops with the lore. Like, Dead Space, that everyone in the world wears a suit that has their health on their spine, which they can't actually see it, so it's only meant for everyone else around them.
And even at that, like, there's still other issues, but there's always issues that you run into with diegetic, and you need your UI to be fully clear to the player and the player experience, which, there are games that make survival games that put your hunger and thirst on a watch. And now every 5 minutes you have to annoyingly pull your watch up to your face and be like, am I starving or am I hungry?
Yeah, and survival games, like any game that has a hardcore edge to it will attract a hardcore fan base. As you said earlier, that there are people who base their self-worth on the games they play. Oh, I beat so-and-so on, nightmare difficulty, and I did without any deaths, and, I found it easy, so what's your problem?
Mm-hmm. But with the diegetic UI, you have to be very careful. You need to make sure that it's very clear to the players what it is, and it's not annoying. You don't want to have to, have a stat that you have to constantly reference, that you got to stop and press a button to see. No. If you're going to have to constantly reference it, it better be constantly there, kind of thing, on display.
Yeah.
in some way or another.
And if
And you need to be sure that if you find a way to do that diegetically, good on you, kind of thing. But it's hard because there's a lot of things in a lot of games that require to be constantly displayed. So if you have too many things and you don't have enough places to display them constantly, then it's not good. Now then you can what is generally the best way to do a diegetic UI is not going all diegetic. You're going mostly diegetic and going minimalist for everything else. And that can lead that very diegetic UI feel while not being bad or annoying. And you definitely never want it to be bad or annoying, because there's no point in making a bad or annoying game unless you're trying to make it for PewDiePie to play.
Yep. And again, like diegetic UI, that's another topic, like right there. Like we could certainly spend another hour or two just on that one. But a lot of people, as we've said, will internalize any issues, any nitpicks, any minor to major problems with your game as, quote unquote, part of the charm. It's okay that you need to press 5 buttons to jump. That's just how this game plays.
It's okay if the game has horrible art. That's how the game plays.
Mm-hmm. And like we've said, there's a line between I'm trying to make a game for so-and-so market and saying I want to make a game that is specifically for this group of people and nobody else, and if anyone else tries to play this game, they are going to be completely repelled by it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you have, like we said, a lot of the discussions about UI UX design, and this will be my last one because then we'll go on a whole major tangent for our show that we're trying to avoid, is that you want things to be as clear and as concise as possible. And the basic lesson is that UI should never be complicated. You can make your game, challenging and make your game deep, but just trying to figure out what's going on should be as simple as possible.
And he's specifically talking from the player's point of view. It should be simple.
Yeah.
Now, it can be as complicated as you want from the development side.
But the consumer should be able to sit down and figure out what your game is. And if it takes, 50 hours of YouTube lessons and reading 30 different guides on Steam, there's a problem there. And we see that issue again from a lot of franchises that get that moment in the spotlight. Paradox Software, Paradox Interactive with their grand strategy games. And grand strategy and RPG genres in particular have had those cases where they'll get that one game that kind of bubbles up to the surface. Somebody new decides to play it, and they are just... It's like a deer in the headlight situation. Like, what the hell is this game? Why does anyone even like this title to begin with? And when they go into the forums to say, what's going on, they are then, piled on by 50 different people saying, oh, it works fine for me, you just suck at it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I tell you all the time. But it's usually true then. But
But you'll tell that to somebody new trying to learn a game.
No. Unless they're a masochist.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of developers struggle, again, with this idea of how do I make my game for X, but still leave it wide enough for a larger market? And one of the big areas about this is with difficulty. And I could certainly, after my talk with Steve this past week, I could certainly spend the next 2 hours just on the topic of difficulty itself. But
the other aspect is UI UX, because the thing is when you want to make a game and you want to target an audience, you want to target a large enough audience kind of thing, And when you target that large enough audience, you're going to want to, go beyond that audience and make a game that doesn't just appeal to that audience, but appeals to a broader appeal on top of that audience. So you have a specific audience that you're going to advertise and market to, but then you have this acceptance of other people that could possibly become fans of that game that are not already part of your target audience. For example, with my last game, tactical RPGs have a specific market. That is a specific market already. But I wanted to appeal to them, both the hardcore and the not so hardcore. And I wanted to be like, people who have not played tactical RPGs or don't like the tactical RPGs of the past, I want to try to extend a olive branch of sorts to try to get this as their first enjoyed game of that kind. And, at the same time of not degrading anything that the target audience likes. And a lot of that is through UI, UX design.
But there is a double-edged sword to that statement. That if you focus too much on people who aren't playing your games, you may be creating more work with very limited reach. And it is a very careful balance. So I know when you were talking about kind of streamlining the UI, that a lot of people, you did get complaints from people saying this game feels too dumbed down. And you have to be able to...
No, nobody complained that it was too dumbed down. They complained that they did not, that there was nothing to the game. Of course, those people did not play past the 5-minute mark.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing to any game at the 5-minute mark.
Unless it's a 5-minute game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still nothing to it, though.
You need to be able to convey this information to players. And that takes us into marketing and, how you present the game, which is beyond the focus for today. And when it comes to difficulty, that you have to be very careful about what difficulty means to your game. And there are some games that have no difficulty settings. And I like those games, but you have to be really on point with your design to make that work. And I think while plenty of games have tried, I think few have succeeded in making a game that has one difficulty setting, but it still is wide enough for a large market to get into.
Yeah. And to Amir's point about the HUD take out the immersion, number one, you can put an option in there to just disable the HUD, for people. And, you don't have to necessarily make a diegetic UI. Just make it for people who don't like the HUD, can disable it, and they can find out the hard way kind of thing, where everybody else can use the HUD. The other aspect of that is, in my current game, the HUD is what I've designed the HUD to bring you into the immersion, because like the whole kind of concept behind Neon Continuum is that you're playing the game on a futuristic version of basically Windows kind of thing. And so I'm making my HUD look like a futuristic version of Windows. And then like the intro to when you first boot up the game, you walk into a room, you go up to a window overlooking the screen, overlooking the city, you press the window, and all of a sudden it you see it turn on it like a monitor kind of thing, because they have clear monitors like that. That is a thing. And you see it turn on, you see it booting up, and then you log in universe basically into the game, and then it boots up to a Windows like desktop like screen, where you're then acting with different UX elements, just like a futuristic computer, and like all the things I'm theming to be just like a a futuristic computer kind of thing. I even put a clock down in the corner that will actually read your physical desktop clock, all to, both to as a player thing to keep people aware of what time it is so that they don't get lost and form addiction problems, as well as just this further bit of immersion to where they are really in the world kind of thing. And I'm doing that because of the HUD. The HUD is the part that brings you into immersion. So don't think of HUDs necessarily as they're bad, they take you out of immersion. They can absolutely bring you into it. Yeah, and it all depends on how you design it.
But we are getting off topic for today with UI UX here. And to bring this back with talking about like the hardcore fans and trying to avoid these issues, that difficulty design is a very polarizing point when it comes to this. And HUD the game, there we go. When will and this what spreadsheet the game?
That's a Ramin game.
But one of the
Ramin topic game topic. There we go.
But one of the easiest ways to fall into this hardcore fan trap is when it comes to difficulty. Because difficulty by itself is neither good or bad design, despite what many people will say, especially many From Software fans, who will argue that if difficulty is a major point of your game, oh, thank you, Chris, that it is everything about your title. But, as we said before, better design is about trying to reach as large of a market as you can. And there are plenty of ways of doing this, beyond just having a higher than normal difficulty curve.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about difficulty curve is having it higher or lower doesn't necessarily say that you're going to get more or less fans of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a segment that really likes hard games. There's a segment that likes really easy games. There's a segment that's in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And there are variances all the way in between. And here's the thing. People that don't like hard games still plays hard games every once in a while, for the most part. And people who love hard games play easy games from time to time. And none of them necessarily lock you in. Now, if we were talking about the biggest of those, it would be the medium difficulty. Challenging enough, but not too challenging. Challenging enough that basically anybody can beat it with enough time and practice kind of thing. Not so challenging that even if you practice for your entire life, there's no way you're beating a game. That's what Dark Souls is to me. I could play that game for the rest of my life and I would never beat it. I could, because I cannot block, and, I am definitely not good at reading coordinated attacks and, kind of thing, and that kind of thing. But, there's that line of where somebody can beat it, but will only be able to beat it if they practice and whatnot. And that's sort of the medium difficulty.
But let me give you the response from the From Software fans. Just get good at blocking. Yep, and the skill ceiling and skill floor are essential points when it comes to talking about difficulty in games. But when people have issues with your game or want to put things in to make it easier or give other people a chance at playing, that should not and would not affect the hardcore base. But a lot of hardcore fans will just vehemently decry anything that changes the experience that they've known for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And
or even changes it to have an option for other people. Not even changes it for them, just changes it for other people. Like putting a setting that you can tick in there, and as long as they don't tick it, it doesn't change anything for them, and they will be absolutely opposed to it.
Yeah, and despite complaining about Celeste's assist mode, the nice thing about it is that it is completely optional. And this is the point when we talk about these kinds of features, that if something is optional and somebody's complaining about it, they really don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to that argument. Because if I want to make the game super masochistically difficult, I can do that. And it will not affect you in one way, shape, or form. Just as if somebody wants to play the game on the easiest setting, that's not going to make your life any better or worse.
Well, the thing is they're against it, because the fact is they place their self-worth on beating that game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can beat it, then their life has no meaning.
Yeah.
But if they're placing their life worth on beating a game, then it's arguable that their life never had a meaning to begin with. And, that's something that they need to go talk about to a therapist and get resolved, and not
their game developer.
Yeah.
And
game developers are not therapists.
Mm-hmm. And the fighting genre has been another big example of this. How long has it taken fighting games to try and adopt, some measurement of a tutorial for new players? I mean, the only one that I think really came to mind was Mortal Kombat 11. And you have to, again, be very aware of the audience that's coming into your game, especially, and I think this is another interesting point about this. Like I said earlier, when certain games or certain genres blow up, Among Us being a really good example of this last year. One day nobody ever heard of this game, next day everybody heard of this game. And when games get that moment in the spotlight, as a developer, you need to capitalize on it. And one of the best ways to do that is to see what newcomers think of your game. Because some people, and I've heard this from a lot of hardcore fan bases, they hate it when a game gets a free weekend, or it goes on sale, or a big YouTuber picks up and mentions to their crowd, because they feel that it is, diluting the fan base when new people come in.
Mm-hmm. And to Chris's point, it's called a Phoenix Down. Final Fantasy teaches you that, especially Final Fantasy X, when you have the undead dragon and then you put Phoenix Down on it, and it dies instantly.
Don't forget, it also works on undead trains, like in Final Fantasy VI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other point to fighting games you were talking about, when it comes to UI design of a fighting game, the one game that comes to mind with good UI design is the Soul Calibur series, because that's the only one I'm able to play that's good design, because every attack in there makes sense. You press the sword button and it swings a sword. Are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hello?
Hello? Uh-oh. Did we lose Shark again?
Hello?
Hello?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. The Dark Souls fans have found Shark.
My internet's crashing. My OBS is not streaming right now.
Uh-oh. Oop. Mine just hiccup for a second. Uh-oh.
Okay, we should be live now. Again.
Mm-mm. The mothers have found us. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start that part over. When it comes to fighting games, UI design, the one that comes to mind as good UI design would be Soul Calibur.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the attacks in Soul Calibur make sense. That you have a sword button kind of thing. You press the sword button, you swing your sword button. You press forward with your sword button, and you swing your sword forward. Who would have thought?
Mm-hmm.
You press forward and down, and you do a lower hit like towards their legs with your sword.
Wait,
You
so
press
if you press a down back, your character's turned into a high kick? You know, like we'd see in Mortal Kombat?
no. If you push down back with a sword attack, it'll probably do like a spinning slash down at their legs, like a trip slash kind of thing with their sword.
Or
If
press the kick button to start a punch attack.
Yeah, or you press back and sword, and you might charge back and then jab forward, kind of thing. Not to be confused with Josh Bycer.
Mm-hmm.
You might press up and that, and you might sweep up. You press up, just regular up and sword, and now you might do like this, like almost like uppercut like move, but with your sword.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just with the sword, you know. And
It's
then
amazing.
like they do the same thing for like their other weapons and move types and whatnot. And it's so intuitive, you know, through the UI UX design that it just makes sense, you know.
And
what makes sense to push down, left, right, down, left, right, down,
or
8,
circle forward.
6, you know, 5, 4, 8, you know,
Mm-hmm.
6, 9, 2, 4, down, left, over to do a fatality that just, or babality that just turns into baby. How does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Not the babality part, but the move. How does that make any sense? Like, it doesn't.
Yeah,
It's just this opposite.
Opposite?
No, obfuscation.
Okay. Yeah,
It's just, you know, this random thing. It's basically what it is DDR.
Yeah.
And it means nothing. It is just these random things. And I don't like a DDR fighting game, you know.
And
I'll play regular DDR and I'll play Soul Calibur. I only play it once. But, you know.
What about, can you play Soul Calibur and DDR at the same time? And Guitar Hero too. There you go. But
I played a lot of Guitar Hero back in the day.
And I want to go to Amir's comment about that it is the loop, but your fan base will evolve. It's inevitable. That, again, is a major point about this. And it's something that we've said many times before, that if you want a game or a franchise to survive, you need a fan base of all skill levels. Because, and this, normally we talk about this from a multiplayer standpoint, but this can certainly apply to single-player games as well. That if you only have an audience of 1,000 people who will play your game, well, I hope you can design a game that you can earn a living off of 1,000 sales. Because you're not getting anyone else to play your game if you turn away everyone who's not your hardcore fan.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, like, you can have a game that has a very wide appeal. And you can do this with difficulty settings, with different design elements, and the different spectrums or the different extremes of your fan base, in most cases, should not interact with each other. This is a very important point about multiplayer games. You don't want your newcomers to be going against your top 100 LO-rated player base, because that's not helping anybody.
Well, it helps Call of Duty and other games that are trying to sell microtransactions, because they're like, hey, look at this person who just beat your butt. He paid to win. Wouldn't you like to pay to win too? Yeah, that's where that comes into effect.
Yeah,
when it's quote unquote better.
Mm-hmm. And anything that you can do to make your game, and going back to what we said earlier about design. Anything you can do to make your game have wider appeal while still keeping the DNA or the foundation is ultimately going to be a net positive for your game. And like we've said, that's where UI UX design comes in.
Yep, that's where its big strength is, because the number one thing that bad UI UX does is it shuts everybody out. That is not absolutely hardcore on board with that.
Yep, and one of the things that, like, on my thumbnail, I of course put in there La Mulana 2. And La Mulana is another example of this. There's a lot of fiddly, annoying issues with that game that could have been, smooth or streamlined, and it would still keep the game's hardcore bite, but make it more palatable to people. Alright, Chris, have a good rest of your day, and happy Mother's Day to you and your family, and enjoy your dinner.
Yep, and we probably won't be going much longer anyway.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, we said it was going to be a short topic, but who knows what happens with these. But with La Mulana, like, there are elements in that game they could have done to improve things, not only from a UI UX standpoint, but just a general onboarding point of view. And if they would have done that, more people could have played the game. And another aspect of this kind of hardcore fan base is that they want everything to be hardcore. It should be a struggle just to get your character moved from point A to point B on the screen. And while people will certainly love games like this, again, you have to realize that it is limiting your fan base. And if you are fine with that, if you are more than happy to only have, 500 to 2,000 people play your game, more power to you. But if you are trying to design a franchise or build a business, there's a reason why a lot of people gravitate towards AAA games. Not only because of the marketing and the money that goes behind it, but because AAA games are usually very polished, and they're oftentimes very accommodating for a wide audience.
Yeah, and something needs to be clarified off of what Josh said with the numbers, the player numbers. Is some of you out there might be like, wow, those are big player numbers. I would be more than happy to get those. And the thing is here's the fact, is you wouldn't be. I mean, you may right now. But if you're going to run the business out of this, you're not going to be. Because the fact is a business requires employees and not just a solo developer kind of thing. And you're going to have to pay these people $40,000, $50,000 a year kind of thing. And if you're only making, let's say you're doing a game a year kind of thing, good luck getting $50,000 alone from 5,000 people. That's you're going to be charging $10 for that game. But here's the thing: is if you only put a year of development with 2 people in there, likelihood is people are going to pay 5,000 people are not going to pay $10 for that game. Likelihood is only 300 will be paying $10 for that game. The other people are going to be waiting for the 90% off sale when they get it for 50 cents. And then that's where your other people will be playing it at. And and you're not going to get those sales. You're going to be stuck with the 300 until you go to that 90% off sale, and you're going to be having a problem, kind of thing. And
or just take all the money and just try and build the next Stardew Valley, and you'll be perfectly fine, right? Just repeat what somebody else has done.
Oh, yeah. And, Stardew Valley is another one that people, like, he did that solo. Yeah, can you name another game that was successful that was solo? And I mean, actually solo, not like that Ninja Gaiden like game that was quote unquote solo with like 5,000 people in the credits.
Yeah.
I mean, by that, thing is EA's a solo developer. I mean, EA makes those games just one person.
But everyone is just Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo is just one person, you know.
Hmm. And everyone is Nintendo at the same time. Is that philosophical or safely extreme?
It might be stupidly extreme.
But when it comes to a wider appeal, I want to bring up R-Type Final 2 for a second. That I'll have my review up probably for Monday. And one of the things I mentioned in it is that it's not like the more I play that game, see like where the appearance or where the audience is going with it. It's a game that's specifically meant for the R-Typer fans. Again, the people who are going 1cc the entire game and they're going to endlessly pour over every level to figure out the most optimal path and just break the game. And this is a holdover from arcade design, that many arcade games and classic titles are easy if you know everything there is beforehand. You know, if I know exactly how this game's going to play out, surely I can, it's an easy game, right? But as a developer, you need to be able to understand and appreciate other people who are trying to play this game. And when I look at R-Type Final 2, I don't see anything of value for somebody who's not already a hardcore fan of it. And
that's the kind of the issue we ran into with a famous beat 'em up called what was it?
Not Streets of Rage, but
Streets of Rage 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because Streets of Rage 3 was balanced in such a way that you had to know every in and out. You had to know how to break that game to be able to get anywhere in it, because it was brutally difficult in the pain in the ass way. It wasn't brutally difficult as in just being really hard. It was brutally difficult as in you had to cheese it to win.
Yeah, but there is a very important point to clarify, because I know somebody's going to leave this comment about franchises. That if we're up to game 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever in a series, then surely you should expect everyone who's buying the game to have played the previous games, right? No. Especially for long-running franchises. Especially when they have evolutions as well. Somebody who's playing Super Mario Odyssey probably didn't play Super Mario Brothers. Or, Final Fantasy X to Final Fantasy III. And as a developer, you need to weigh that in with your franchises. That if we're up to the 6th, 7th, or whatever game in a franchise, you shouldn't be balancing your game only around the people who have played every game in the past and have played on the highest difficulty and they completely mastered it. Because again, that's how you limit the audience for your game.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's natural that the next part sells more than the first part. It's because it's natural for the next game period, whether it's in the same franchise or not, that it sells more than the last one. It's not 100%, but it's natural to happen, because naturally you build up a fan base in game 1 of whatever game it is. Then when you make game 2, a lot of the fan base that you already built up will buy your next one, and then a lot of the fan base from that you built up from both games will buy your third game, whether it's in the same franchise or not. It doesn't matter, because of course this is not a 100% rule. Like, we can look at Clay and see, they made Don't Starve, and they got a fan base there. Then they made Don't Starve Together, and a lot of people that bought Don't Starve also bought Don't Starve Together. But there was many people who also bought Don't Starve Together that did not have Don't Starve. And then they made Oxygen Not Included, which most people that have, either one of the other games bought Oxygen Not Included, as well as a whole bunch of other people that didn't have it.
And it's also important to note that as a developer grows, so does their reach. So as you get bigger, more people are going to hear about you, which in turn means more people are going to play your later games if you do it right. Again, you don't want your first game to sell 10,000 copies, then your second game to sell 8,000 copies, then your third game sells 5,000 copies. That's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and that's what that kind of the negative kind of design would get you when you're only appealing to that one fan base. Where, but that's not 100% rule, because after that, they made Clay made the Floor is Lava, or what is that?
Hot Lava, and then they made Grifflin's. I think Grifflin's still in development right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Griffin will outdo Oxygen Not Included sales. But the Floor is Lava will not.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the ship has sailed or sunk in that case.
But it did sell pretty well, kind of thing.
But not.
But the thing is it didn't appeal to enough of their core audience. Where Grifflin's does, I think.
Well, Grifflin's right now has more sales than... yeah, it definitely has more sales than Hot Lava.
What about Oxygen Not Included?
No. Definitely not.
I think it'll get there.
Yeah, and when you're trying to get a wider market like this, you can experiment with different designs as a developer as you grow. That's, again, one of the advantages of getting to that point of not only clout, but stabilizing your company. That if you know you have an audience of 50,000 people, you can experiment, and some of them are going to buy your game just on, your name alone.
You made the game.
Exactly.
And that's the reason why sales in general increase each game you make.
And again, if they don't...
But that's if you're doing it right.
Exactly.
If you're doing it wrong, and people who bought your first game or bought a game hated it, then they probably aren't going to buy your next game. They're going to probably, stay the heck away from your next game.
And if your fan base curses at them and screams at them when they have a comment, they're probably not going to buy your next game as well.
Unless the developer steps in on it.
Or they step in and they support the hardcore abuse. Then probably not.
Yeah.
And there's something I want to touch on with R-Type Final, as well as some of the other hardcore games that I've played. And that is where your... and I think this may be my final point, because we're at about an hour and 15 in. But where do you focus the bulk of your gameplay on? Because this is something that we haven't really touched on yet in this discussion. That there are a lot of games that, if, imagine my fingers here, imagine this is a line graph. And on this side is the casual audience, this side is the hardcore audience. And what some developers will do, especially if they have a game that is meant to be challenging, is they will focus the bulk of their content on this side. That the base game could be, maybe 40 minutes to an hour's worth of content, and then everything is backloaded for the extreme player base. Not only just in terms of how you play the game, but where the rewards are, where the game gets interesting, where, quote unquote, the game begins. And you have to be very careful about this. For instance, I'm reading the forum on R-Type Final 2, and I see that people are talking about the different routes and the different challenges there. I didn't see any of that because I got my butt handed to me so many times playing the game on normal. And when I was done with that, I don't have any more desire to play that game. So all that content, all that focus is lost on me, and I'm sure for a very wide group of people who wanted to play that game. Now,
especially since it was lost on you because you're the masochist and you're definitely into suffering through stuff.
Yeah. And we see this also with roguelikes. Like with Binding of Isaac, for instance, that one of the things, and this is both, I think, good and bad, that when Edmund adds in new content with the expansions, a lot of that stuff is backloaded. When they add in the mall fight, when they've added in Mother, and some of the new elements. Oh, there's our Mother's Day comparison here. But when you backload the content in your game, you have to be aware of what somebody new or casual players will get out of it. Now, with the Binding of Isaac's case, One of the advantages that with that kind of roguelike structure is that adding in new rooms, adding in new items and events, that's for everybody. And you always want to add stuff in that is going to appeal to a wider market. If, for instance, if the Biovisor expansion only added in the tainted fights and the super extreme bosses, you're not really getting value for the majority of your fan base in that case.
And to Amir's comment, the hardcore fans wouldn't want it dumbed down. Well, that is where you have to get good as a developer and design your game in such a way that the hardcore will enjoy it as well as the non-hardcore.
And that goes beyond difficulty settings. You can do that with the design of your game as well. Like having, different modes or different ways of playing the game for easy, normal, and expert players.
Yeah, and if you really want to go the extra mile, make them each a different experience kind of thing. Make them required to go through in order kind of thing. To where, it's not only a different difficulty, but it's a different experience entirely kind of thing.
Yeah. And
it's not necessarily the Goldilocks zone, because it's very hard to get appeal to everybody, but you want as wide as appeal as possible.
Yeah. We've been talking about Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden's difficulty settings were really good in Ninja Gaiden Black, because they basically redesigned the game for every difficulty setting. So they added in new enemies, they changed all the item locales, even changed the boss fights as you go up in difficulty. So what you want, I think, ultimately for this kind of discussion, or at least when it comes to difficulty, you want to have your cake and eat it too. You can design a game to be very challenging and difficult, but don't forget about the people who don't want it, the non-masochists, I guess you could say, the people who aren't me. Don't forget about those who want to play your game and they just want to relax and have a good time. And I think
don't forget about your Sharkies. You can appeal to your masochists of Josh, but don't forget to appeal to your Sharkies too.
And Steve from Able Gamers, I think this is the best point for at least this point about difficulty. That yes, you can look at it from the humanitarian standpoint, but there's also the money standpoint. Somebody who just wants to play your game casually, who has $60 to spend, their money is just as good as your hardcore fan base who only wants the hardest challenge, and they'll pay $60 as well. So
it could be arguably more important, because if there's 500,000 of them with $60 versus 5,000 of them with $60, which do you want to go after?
Mm-hmm. And if you can make your game,
both, but you definitely want to, I think, in general, more focus on the more rather than the less.
And again, you have to balance everything with the design of your game, because if you make your game completely inaccessible to everybody, like just as Elgoto said, if you completely destroy what brings everybody to your game to begin with, you could be left with a game that appeals to nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
you definitely don't want to appeal to nobody. You're definitely not going for appeals to everybody, so then it appeals to nobody kind of thing. You're going to appeal to certain people, and then you want to broaden that, kind of thing. It's like a soda bottle kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can only get so much into that hole kind of thing at the top of the soda bottle when you're trying to fill it up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you shouldn't leave it like that. You should put a funnel on it so that you can get more in there quicker, kind of thing. You're catching more area, kind of thing. Now, am I saying that you should put a funnel in there the size of the Empire State Building? No. I'm saying you should put a reasonably sized funnel on there. Do what you can without messing up the bottle or doing stuff that makes no sense. Don't get a funnel that's bigger than the bottle you're pouring it into.
Yeah. And again, this is also one of the challenges of game design, is that you have to understand, A, what is the appeal of my game, and B, what are the barriers of entry of my game? Because what was that?
Besides the price tag.
Yeah. Because a lot of hardcore fans, again, will treat those barriers of entry as, the badge of honor of playing your game. And you don't want to do that. And if you only prescribe to that, you are limiting everything about the appeal of your game. Because, again, you can have a very challenging gameplay, but it shouldn't be challenging to play your game in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the thing is the hardcore players may bounce off if it's too hard to play to begin with.
mm-hmm. Well, they'll never admit that.
No.
And, I mean, we've played games that... And this is, I think, because we've played games... I don't want to name the developer, because it is an example that we've talked about in the past, and I don't want to be seem like attacking them, but we've played games from developers that are very difficult to play. They're very challenging. And the developer has basically completely sided with the hardcore fans. And yes, the game is quote-unquote their vision. But when a game has less than 20 reviews, your vision may not be the best marketing for your business.
Yeah. If you only had 20 reviews, you did something wrong.
Even if people say it's the best damn game ever.
Mm-hmm. I would know. My last game had 14 reviews. I know I did something very, very wrong. The art was very, very wrong in it. But if you have 20 reviews or less, you did something wrong. It's not just luck. There's definitely more to it than luck. You have to figure out what you did wrong. If you have less than 100 reviews, you did something wrong. Mm-hmm. It's more than just luck.
Yeah. No matter what people
marketing,
say.
It may be your art, it may be your UI UX, it may be your difficulty, it may be any number of things. Mm-hmm. It may be that you're appealing too hard to hardcore fans. Wait, it may be that you're being too hardcore at targeting your hardcore fans.
There we go. And when this happens, you are just limiting everything there is about your game. Even if your game is amazing, if people can't experience it or they're just so frustrated by it, you are cutting that out. And there are games that are known for being brutally difficult for one reason or another. And there is nothing, again, inherently good or bad about difficulty. But how you bring somebody into this game, how they approach your game from a first-time standpoint, is very important as a developer. Because if you leave people out, you are hurting not only that game, but you're hurting future games from yourself. Because if you do problem A in your first game, chances are that problem is going to be in game number 2 and game number 3. And again, this is a trap I see a lot of indie developers fall into, that they wonder why more people aren't buying their games or why things aren't improving, when it's just literally them repeating the same mistakes, and a lot of people aren't, falling for the same trick 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Mm-hmm. Ford says when designing for a niche market, it's better to be a top-tier game. Well, number one, what is a top-tier game? And it's not really designing to be a top tier, but you want to be different. You want to appeal to that niche at the same time, and you want to be you want to have everything in line. You know, you want to have your aesthetics in line. You want to have your UI design in line. You want to have your UX design in line. You want to have everything in line.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess would be a top tier game, because when you do good at everything, then you did good at everything. But it would also be different and appealing to the niche at the same time.
Yeah.
So it'd be top tier plus those two things.
Yeah, and typically, if your game is top tier, it will usually have good UI and UX on top of that.
Oh, it has to.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be top tier if it wasn't.
And
they could call itself top tier, but it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
AAA does that all the time.
And when developers tend to struggle with only listening to that hardcore base, their games often aren't going to be top tier. They'll maybe top tier to that, again, the 5 to 10% of hardcore players are going to play it, but they're not going to do much for anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, like a lot of niche games, like to what Gordo said there, that they'll get a little bit of success, and they're not going to understand A, why the game succeeded, or B, why it didn't appeal to anyone else. And this is, again, like another issue for the hardcore fans, that when a game achieves that a little bit more success and new people come in, you have to, as a developer, welcome those people. Welcome the ones who are going to praise your game. Welcome to the ones who aren't going to praise your game. Because this is your chance to grow your fan base. And if you squander that, you basically just took a kneecap to your entire studio.
Yep. And you don't want to take a knee. Unless you're in football.
Or an arrow to the knee, too.
Oh, you definitely don't want to take an arrow to the knee. More or less both arrows to the knee, and then scream about it, back and forth. If anybody gets that reference.
But we are about an hour and a half in, so I think we can probably wrap things up. So, to summarize our talk for today, video games need a hardcore audience. You need your hardcore evangelists who are going to shout the praises of your game, who are going to do kind of a lot of marketing for you. But in the same breath, you can't only appeal to them, whether it's from a design standpoint, a marketing standpoint, and even from a UI UX standpoint. As Shark has said, you want to cast as wide a net as you can with your games while still having that core foundation. And if anyone says, well, how do I make my game appealing if it's a very specific design, there are always ways to improve the UI and UX of your title. And it just comes down to figuring that out. And if you can do that, your ultimate goal is that your game should not only be about your hardcore fanatics. You want every game, to grow. And if you're doing that right, you can have successes like Clay. You can have Clay make, a very wide appealing game like Don't Starve. You can have them do something, amazingly complex and unique with auction not included. You can have Invisible Ink and Hot Lava and so on. And ultimately, they can do that because they have a wide enough fan base to support those crazy ideas.
And the way they got that wide enough fan base was by growing the fan base always, not shutting out people when they came around. That's the reason why you want to not only appeal to the fan base that you already have, you want to appeal to the potential fan base that you could potentially get and potentially grow from, because the fan base you have will slowly trickle out.
Unless you're doing more.
Add more people than what you're losing, or else you're not growing as a developer, you're shrinking as a developer, which shrinking as a developer means that you're dying. And let me tell you this, Nobody likes shrinkage. Don't shrink as a developer. It's not a pretty thing.
And if you do try, and another big point that we see from going back to that point about developers who get some success, is that when a developer gets a little bit of success, they will often try to, they'll shoot for the moon, or, they'll YOLO the next game. Oh, we got a little bit more success, let's put everything into our next title with some crazy experimental idea. But the problem is that if you try to go YOLO and you don't have a fan base to support it, you're basically flushing all the success and all the money you've earned down the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
But
so we're about ready to wrap things up now?
Yep. Do you have anything you want to add, Shark?
Be sure to join both of our Discords. There's links to both mine and Josh's Discords down below. Also, lick and smash the lick and smash buttons on both mine and Josh's YouTube channels.
Mm-hmm. And say happy Mother's Day to your mother, for those of you who can.
Yeah. And say it to our mothers, even though you have no way to do it. Join our Discords and say it that way. And of course, come back for more content on both of our channels. You'll see this show on Thursdays, and you'll see Sundays, and you'll see our other show, Indie Inquiries, on Thursdays.
Mm-hmm. And you can also come back and learn about the lore of Red Josh.
Yes.
So, with all that said, like Shark said, you'll find links to all of our social media in the description down below. We'll be back Thursday around 3:30 ET for our indie show, and Sundays are around 4:30 for our Save the Extreme cast. And if you'd like to submit games or topics, be sure to let us know in comments, Twitter, Discords, and all that great stuff.
And don't forget to join the Discord.
Mm-hmm. So, with all that said, I will be back for my regular game streams later tonight, and you can catch Shark on your streams when?
Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays.
All right.
But soon, there's going to be content pretty much every day.
Mm-hmm. With that said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games, and talk about Red Josh all the time. Until next time, take care.